All right, let's dive deeper into this potential bipartisan agreement. Joining me now is Republican Senator Rob Portman of Ohio. He's been a lead negotiator in this bipartisan infrastructure talks. Senator Portman, welcome back to Meet the Press. So I got to ask first this, before I get you to respond to Senator Sanders. Given what we heard from Senator Tester on Friday about the gas tax, I got to ask you, are all 21 of you still on board this deal if you haven't agreed to how you're going to pay for it?
Yes, and in fact, we do have pay-fors. I was interested in hearing from my colleague, Senator Sanders. You said at one point, with regard to the $6 trillion package, the list goes on, and that's the problem. I mean, it's not about infrastructure. It's kind of a $6 trillion grab bag of progressive priorities. Ours is about core infrastructure, and it is paid for. And so it's paid for without raising taxes, which is key. And I do think we have agreement on that. And I do think there's some very creative ways to pay for infrastructure that wouldn't be available for other expenses. As an example, the Infrastructure Bank, which is a bipartisan proposal that says let's use the power of the federal government to borrow at lower rates to be able to leverage private sector funding as well as state and local funding. But also we're repurposing COVID funding, Chuck, and over $100 billion in the proposal is repurposing in three ways funding that has not yet been spent with regard to the COVID-19 packages that have gone out, including the latest $350 billion package to state and local government. They would like to spend some of that on infrastructure. My state of Ohio certainly would, right. And we would permit them to do that, and that helps pay for the package. So there's some creative ways to pay for infrastructure.
So the gas tax is out?
Well, the administration has said that it's out for them. We don't have a gas tax per se. It is going forward indexing the gas tax to inflation. It's been the same since 1993, so the group does support that. But we understand that the administration has very strong views on that, so it's a user fee. We also think that the user fee on electric vehicles is appropriate. Shouldn't electric vehicles or hybrid vehicles pay their fair share in terms of our infrastructure needs, roads and bridges? So I think there's some discussion left on those topics.
All right, is that code for it may end up not being in the final package?
Well, it may not, but the administration, therefore, will need to come forward with some other ideas without raising taxes. What we don't want to do is hurt the economy right now as we're coming out of this pandemic by raising taxes on working families. And that's, frankly, what's done in the $6 trillion package. It's the largest tax increase in American history in addition to this huge spending. So it's important that we have pay-fors, but we don't want to raise taxes.
Well, let me ask you this, and this is, why shouldn't either Jeff Bezos, the individual, or Amazon, the corporation, be contributing more to our infrastructure?
Well, they should be paying taxes, and that's actually part of our proposal, too. We have about a $63 billion pay-for that is helping to close the tax gap. That assumes about a $40 billion investment in the IRS, including, by the way, in better taxpayer service, which is really important right now, but also in enforcement. And let's be sure that we're closing that tax gap. We don't want to do it in a way that's too intrusive in the lives of Americans or in small businesses. But I think that's a good sweet spot, kind of a compromise. The administration talked about a $700 billion fund there. That really is not appropriate in our view, but there's a bipartisan agreement on helping to close that tax gap.
I am curious, though. It does seem as if all the pay-fors, there's this big list, and yes, you called it creative ways. The average person looks at it and says, this is accounting maneuvers. This is only going to increase the deficit. And it seems like there seems to be comfort that, okay, let the deficit go up if it's for infrastructure. Is that where your head is? Is that where this is going to end up being?
No, absolutely not. I would disagree there, Chuck. I think when you look at infrastructure, you have to think about what it is. It's long-term investments. As an example, we've got a bridge over the Ohio River in downtown Cincinnati, where I am, that has been in need of repair for a couple of decades now. It's about a $3 billion project. It's going to take a long time to do it, probably 5 to 10 years, and it's about a 50-year project, we hope. In other words, these hard assets will last for many, many years. So you finance that differently, just as you would in your business or your family. So this is supporting long-term investments to increase our productivity as a country, to increase our competitiveness. Right. All the economics of this work well for our long-term economic growth, and that's what this is about. So it's something that can be paid for differently and has been traditionally. I mean, traditionally, we have allowed the federal government to provide relatively low-interest loans that get paid back. And that's what we have in the proposal, the so-called infrastructure bank, which is a revolving loan program. Much is being done right now with regard to things like water infrastructure or the grid. Of course, the ratepayers themselves will pay that back. So it is a way to pay for it, not going further into deficit, but understanding that these are long-term capital assets that we need to do. By the way, we don't get good marks on our infrastructure in this country, and we're losing out to other countries in terms of our competitiveness. So it's important to do it.
There are many Democratic activists whispering in the White House's ear going, don't trust the Republicans. Mitch McConnell's going to pull the rug out from under them, and suddenly you think you have 11 Republicans, and then the deal dies or this is being dragged out. How committed is this group of 11 Republicans to stick and buy this deal, even if Mitch McConnell says he can't vote for it?
I think we're absolutely committed to it, and I think there's a number of others as well on both sides of the aisle. Last week I heard from a lot of my colleagues saying, I just need to look at one other issue, you know, can you do this, can you do that? But there's a lot of interest in having a bipartisan proposal. And Chuck, this is growing the vote from the middle out. So I think, unfortunately, that's where we are right now in Congress, is that it's more likely we'll have success in doing that. You recall at the end of last year, we did the same thing with regard to a COVID-19 package, which helped to get that final package done at the end of the year after really almost a year of no activity on something that was really necessary. This is the same thing. Everybody wants to do infrastructure. President Trump had a $2 trillion package that he was proposing. President Biden proposed one in his campaign. And by the way, this helps President Biden keep that pledge of having an infrastructure package, but also to keep his pledge of doing things across the aisle and getting something done.
Well, speaking of building something from the middle out, I want to ask you about Joe Manchin's idea on voting reform. He put out a blueprint and a memo, 5 bullet points. They look fairly reasonable. I'm curious what you think. Make Election Day a public holiday, mandate at least 15 days of early voting, ban partisan gerrymandering, require states send absentee ballots to eligible voters, and require voter ID, but including things like utility bills. Is that a basis to start a conversation in your view?
Well, first of all, I appreciate what Joe Manchin is doing here. He's trying to find some middle ground. Unfortunately, what he does is what the larger bill S1 does, which is it takes the election system in this country and federalizes it. So it's a federal takeover of our election system. And as you know, under the Constitution, the states are given that power.
I don't,
and
you know,
only in
I mean,
extraordinary circumstances.
Wait, only because there's usually a baseline.
It would be telling my state of Ohio that
federal government tells the state how to spend transportation money sometimes.
Well, that's true when there's federal money provided for that. In this case, what he's saying to the state of Ohio or your state of Florida, we're going to decide how redistricting is done. We're going to take it away from the democracy, in effect, which is right now in Ohio, you know, our state legislature makes that decision. These are elected representatives, and he wants to take it away and make it a federal responsibility through some kind of a commission. But even provisional voting. I mean, he says that if you get a provisional vote outside of the precinct, you know, you have to include it. Well, that's a state rule, you know, that some states allow and some don't. So the bottom line is we should make it easy to vote in this country. We should also make it hard to cheat. I'm proud of our Ohio election system, and I think they do a very good job. And it's based on a bipartisan approach, because we have Democrats and Republicans at every election board in every county. And why take that away from the state of Ohio? So that's the concern about what Joe's trying to do. Although, again, I appreciate he's trying to find that middle ground, and who knows, maybe something can be done.
Senator Portman, happy Father's Day, sir. Appreciate you coming on and sharing your perspective.
Happy Father's Day to you, Chuck. Thanks for having me on again. Take care.